Title: My 34F husband, 36M, left me when I got pregnant, but I got the ultimate revenge. I didn't expect to be writing this on Reddit, but I think I just need to get it all off my chest. So here goes. My husband, Mark, and I had been together for 8 years, married for 5. He was my rock, my partner, the love of my life, or so I thought. We'd both been career-focused, both loved traveling, and generally saw eye to eye on things, except one, having kids. I had always wanted a family. I grew up in a big, loving home and wanted to bring that into my life with Mark. He was always on the fence about it, but I figured he just needed time. So I put off the baby conversation for years. But one day, when I was 34, I realized time was ticking, and I had to know for sure if he was in or out. We talked, and he seemed hesitant, but he said he'd be open to trying. Maybe I'll feel different when it's real, he said. I knew he wasn't thrilled, but he didn't outright say no, and I took that as his agreement. I stopped birth control, and after about 5 months, I was pregnant. When I told Mark, I thought he'd be shocked but excited. Instead, he just went pale. He didn't speak to me for a few hours and then told me he needed to think. I figured he'd come around after he processed it. Except he didn't. The next few weeks were tense. He was distant and barely said a word to me. He'd leave for work trips for days on end, and even when he was home, he'd sleep on the couch. I was scared. Finally, I confronted him, and he dropped the bombshell. He wanted out. He said he wasn't ready to be a dad, and didn't want the responsibility. He tried to make it sound like this was my fault too, that I'd tricked him by getting pregnant, even though he'd known and agreed to it. I was furious and devastated. He packed his bags that night and left. I was heartbroken, alone and scared. But as the days went on, I realized I had to put myself and this baby first. I decided to be strong and get through this, with or without him. Then, a mutual friend let it slip that he'd been seeing someone else on these work trips and had actually been seeing her for months. That was the last straw. He hadn't just left me. He'd been cheating and lying about everything. I was angry, and that anger lit a fire in me that I didn't even know existed. After a few days of letting that anger simmer, I decided I wouldn't let him get away with this. I was the one who put him through grad school, helped him get his dream job, and had even co-signed his business loan. And now, I was left with nothing? Not anymore. Since I was financially tied to him, I took action. I hired a lawyer and found out that, in my state, I was entitled to half of his assets, and because we hadn't been separated for long, I was still legally his wife. I filed for divorce and got the process rolling fast. I was determined to get what I deserved. But here's where the real twist comes in. After months of preparing, I managed to seize his bank accounts, his stock options, and a significant share of his business, all thanks to the paperwork I'd signed during our marriage. It turned out, I had more control over our shared assets than even he knew. He found out when he tried to buy a new car with his girlfriend and his card got declined. By then, he was furious, messaging me about how vindictive I was and how I was ruining his life. I told him he'd made his choice, and now he had to live with the consequences. To add to the revenge, our mutual friends, his family, and even his new girlfriend found out everything. He went from being this successful, suave guy to a man who cheated on his pregnant wife, abandoned her, and then got outsmarted in a divorce. He tried to save face, but the damage was done. Meanwhile, I had a beautiful baby boy, surrounded by a great support system, family, and friends who helped me through it all. My son will grow up knowing that his mom stood strong, even when it felt like the world was against her. So, to anyone going through something similar, never underestimate your strength. You never know what you're capable of until life forces you to find out.